Welcome, everyone, to the Blacks in Technology Bit Tech Talk podcast, a show where we talk to Black people who are engineers, innovators, educators, inventors, change makers, and entrepreneurs doing amazing things in the world of technology. The Bit Tech Talk podcast is where they show how they are stomping the divide by sharing their stories, ideas, knowledge, and perspective on tech with the Bit community.
Welcome to the show, Dennis. Glad to have you.
Yeah, appreciate it, Greg. Glad to be here. I'm excited.
Yeah, excellent. Yeah, it's been a minute since I've done these podcasts, so I'm excited to jump back into it. Tell us a little bit about yourself, kind of where you're from, and give us a little bit of that background.
For sure. So I'm from St. Louis, Missouri. I grew up in St. Louis, lived there till about 2008. I had a really just different childhood growing up in a city like St. Louis. It was not always as much opportunity that I would like in the tech industry when I was growing up. So ultimately, I kind of veered into a pathway that was a little bit different than most of the people that were my peers at that time period. I eventually, after high school, I moved to Atlanta. I studied electrical and computer engineering down at Georgia Tech. And then from Georgia Tech, I had the opportunity to start in the power industry, but eventually got into computing and hardware and software and things of that nature. Shifted my gears later in my college career to really locking in on computing. And then ultimately, I had some really amazing opportunities out of Atlanta, which originally I was intending on moving to California right after I got out of Georgia Tech, but just opportunities kind of presented themselves out there that allowed me to want to stay in Atlanta for a little bit longer. I basically grew myself professionally and my network, my experience and that stuff in Atlanta, and eventually moved out here to California at the top of 2020.
Nice. So I'm curious about your time in St. Louis. By the way, we're kind of neighbors. Like
Okay.
I'm in Cincinnati,
Dope.
Ohio. So that's what 5 hours west
Yeah, we're
from
Midwest brothers, man.
Midwest. Yep, for sure. So tell me a little bit about your early interest in tech. Like how did you you said you didn't there weren't a lot of your peers that were into tech. How did you get into it?
All right, for sure. So, my age, I'm 35. So when I was growing up, I want to say the internet started to pop around maybe sixth or seventh grade for me, like commercial side of the internet started to come out more. So, you get stuff like AOL and all of these different things that were kind of popping up a lot. So around like middle school, early high school, I really started getting intrigued by the internet. We had like dial-up for a while, but I used to literally walk to the library in my neighborhood to go get on the internet when I was like, I could vividly remember these times when I'm like 11, 12 years old, like walking to the library to use the internet and just accessing a lot more information. So for me, I always had a fascination with it once I got exposed to it. Once I got into high school, there was some things that kind of piqued my interest even more. So I had chose a pathway of wanting to be in technology in middle school. I wanted to kind of focus in on technology, specifically from a business perspective. So I was always an entrepreneur even before I was actually passionate about technology. Like I actually started out more like my first job wasn't even a job. I was actually an entrepreneur cutting grass in my neighborhood. I literally, the moment my dad gave me a lawnmower, I literally walked around my whole neighborhood trying to find people, trying to get myself 5 to 10 people that I can cut their grass on a regular basis. So I was an entrepreneur first, but I knew that I needed a pathway that would kind of allow me to unlock more economic opportunity, given that I was coming from a city like St. Louis. It wasn't like there was just overflowing amounts of resources in the environment that I grew up in. I did have access, and we were blessed, but I just knew that there was a difference from some of the other things that I had saw, given just being a student. Like I was a very active student. Like I was like always doing really, really good on standardized tests and always had really, really good grades. So I was a student a certain kind of way. But eventually, when I got to middle school and I chose that pathway of technology and business in high school, the thing that really piqued my interest in the direction I wanted to go in was Facebook. Facebook came out when I was in high school, excuse me, when I was in high school, 2004, 2003, something like that. And when I was in high school, Facebook wasn't even for high school students yet. It was literally only a college platform. But the high school that I went to was called Cardinal Ritter College Prep. And given that college was in our high school name, it honestly let our high school be one of the first high schools that had access to Facebook because high schools were not on this platform. So there was like me and all the guys and people that were in my high school. We were on Facebook. Our parents had no idea about it. The faculty and staff had no idea about it. It was just like this own little island that we had. And it kind of piqued my interest in. So when I'm about 14 to 15 years old and I'm seeing Facebook, the first thing I started thinking was, First of all, who made this? Then
Right.
when I figured out who made it, and I was like, hold on, a guy in college made this? What college did he go to? Then I started going down that rabbit hole of kind of understanding that stuff. This was stuff that I was interested in that like very few people were interested in. Everybody was just more interested in like having conversations and talking about music and sports on Facebook. And I'm just like, hold on, man, somebody in college made this? No, what kind of college was he at? What made him? So then I started going down the rabbit hole of studying people and technology and stuff like that. Mark Zuckerberg definitely inspired me to want to go in the pathway of technology. And then I
Mm,
just started studying all the other greats. So I started studying people like Bill Gates, which we all Microsoft and all this stuff and all these things were already ever present during the 90s and the early 2000s. But I just wasn't infatuated with this stuff because I didn't see it as something that was like a pathway that made sense for me growing up in the way that I was growing up. But when I figured out a college kid made Facebook, I kind of felt like this is something I probably could do. But I knew that, of course, coming from the background I was coming from, it might not be as direct of a pathway for me there. So I just was like,
yeah.
all right, what kind of school can I go to that would get me into an environment where I could kind of learn these kind of things? So that's what opened up my eyes to first I wanted to go to MIT, which I did apply to MIT. I had the opportunity to go to MIT, but I didn't think Boston would be the best place for me coming as a kid
Mm,
straight out of the Midwest, out of just the kind of environments and the communities that I was coming from. So I started looking
right.
and I started like, all right, what are the other schools that are kind of on this level that ultimately could give me the opportunity to get around this kind of stuff? So then, I start going down the list. I go Stanford, I go see Carnegie Mellon, you see different schools, and then I see Georgia Tech is like in the top five. Then I realized that Georgia Tech is right in Atlanta, which is ultimately a cultural hotbed for African American people. So I
Right.
ultimately like, I think Georgia Tech could be a good fit for me. And by my junior year in high school, I was just like, I want to go to Georgia Tech. And I started figuring out the pathways to get there. And then ultimately, I did a lot of work. I tried to make my SAT scores as good as I could get them. I always had really good grades and things of that nature. Did community service, and just did as much as I could to present myself as somebody that could be able to survive in an environment like that and thrive as well. But ultimately, I had the opportunity to get accepted to Georgia Tech my senior year of high school, and that's when I kind of started my real journey into the tech space because most of what I
Nice.
was doing in St. Louis was more just kind of dibbling and dabbling in different things, learning different stuff. But I didn't have enough access as I would have ideally wanted at that time. So I was just like,
Right.
how can I get to the place where I can get some access? And that's what Georgia Tech opened the doors up for me.
Nice. Nice. Yeah. That's I kind of had that same mindset. I mean, I'm older than you, but there was a. It always intrigued me when I seen like people depicted geniuses, so to speak, or smart people. My thing was war games. It was an old school movie about a computer hacker who hacked into NORAD,
Mhm.
took control and was so that was kind of my influence. And then I had a couple of people in my life as well that were kind of heavy into electronics and things like that would show me things. But seeing that on screen and just wondering like, wow, man, if that person in war games, I'm not sure if you're hip to the movie, but it starred Matthew Broderick, and he was a teenager in high school, and
Mhm.
so he had an affinity for computers, and so like he had a modem, like an old school modem, a modem where you set the phone on actually, and he was connecting into his high school and changing grades and things like that, and then so he was doing that kind of hacking, and then he hacked into the Defense Department, NORAD. And I thought that was like, man, that's pretty cool. So that's kind of like where the spark of technology started with me. And then like along the way, like you start seeing like you said, like Mark Zuckerberg, I started seeing people like Bill Gates and Steve Jobs and Steve Wozniak and cats like that. And just being more intrigued about like how did they get to where they are? Like how did they obtain the knowledge that they had. I started seeing they like Steve Wozniak was going to all these computer club groups and things like that. So that intrigued me as well. But I relate to you on that level where you kind of see these folks that are in this space. The sad part about it is that none of these folks were black people, right? Like
Exactly.
at least not my early exposure. Of course, now I know a ton of black people in tech, but at the time, growing up, you didn't see anybody.
Of
So
course.
it was kind of that, it was a good thing. And at the same time, it was, kind of wish there
No.
was more representation.
For sure, yeah, I definitely had to deal with that. Like, and I just want to spin a little bit off there because you kind of triggered the thing for me. Because realistically, being as young as I was and wanting to go in those directions, and coming from the community that we're coming from, it seems like most people that are successful from our communities come from different backgrounds, whether it's in the entertainment fields or sports or things of that nature. And for me, I realized that given that there weren't role models. And the crazy thing about it is, I had no idea about, and I don't know if you know about David Stewart, that the CEO of Worldwide Technology. Worldwide Technology is like he's actually a billionaire. It's one of the biggest tech companies. It's a tech service providing company, but ultimately, it's a guy named David Stewart. He actually runs one of the largest tech companies in the world, and it's a black guy. And it's actually based in St. Louis. It's actually based in the St. Louis area. And I literally had no idea about this company the whole time I was growing up in St. Louis, and I had no access, no exposure, but I was extremely passionate about technology. So for me, I figured out, I learned about them later on in my career. But for me, it was always like I always looked at all the other guys that I studied at, like from Bill Gates to Steve Jobs to Jeff Bezos to Mark Zuckerberg. I always had to like study them and also remember that everything with a caveat. These guys are either in certain types of communities that ultimately kind of make it and their stories, they definitely had to deal with resistance to do the things that they did, but there were things that allowed them in their pathways to be able to kind of, make it a little bit less less what do you call it, friction to get where they wanted to go. I knew that
For
the
sure.
process might have been a little bit more difficult for me, but coming from St. Louis, I just always knew that I just have to be resilient. If I want to do something, even though a lot of people didn't believe, like I told people when I was 12 or 13 years old living in St. Louis, like I'm moving to California one day, I'm going to be in technology, doing all of this stuff. And plenty of people told me things of the nature of, "Man, little Dennis, you sound great." All right, little Dennis, okay, all these different kind of things. And for me, it was always one of those things where I just knew that something was calling me in those directions, and whatever was going to take me to get there, I just stayed persistent. But definitely had to have a level of faith and belief, to kind of be in a minority in this space early in the 2000s and stuff like that, to keep just staying dedicated to the process of really developing the skills and then ultimately building those relationships to get where I ultimately wanted to get to in the space.
Yeah, and that it's super important, and that's why I'm glad, like, this organization exists now, because folks that are coming up now, they have that support system. They have those images of positive images of people, black people in tech, that they can look towards and say, oh, okay, yeah, I can do it too. Got a whole community of people that are doing it. I can do it. So yeah, that's definitely important. What's up, everyone? We hope that you're enjoying this episode of the Blacks in Technology Big Tech Talk podcast. Do you or someone you know have a dope story that they want to share with our bit audience? Blacks in Technology is seeking guests to be on our podcast. We're looking to highlight the journeys and experiences of black women and men in the tech industry. So if you know of someone, send them our way. Shoot us an email to contact us at blacksintechnology.net or click on the link in the show notes and fill out our form. We're looking to hear from you. You talk about Georgia Tech, and you went there for electrical engineering, correct?
Electrical and computer. So Georgia
Okay.
Tech, the schools of electrical and computer engineering are kind of like merged together.
Wow. So I know, because I took some electrical engineering courses when I was in school, and I know I know.
I actually started on that pathway. So I literally started on the electrical pathway. I literally spent
Mm,
2.5 years doing government contracting in the energy space. So basically doing feasibility studies, power grid designs, 40 to 50-year plans for military bases and small municipalities. So I spent literally 2.5, almost 3 years working in the electrical space before I converted over to computing and hardware.
wow. What was your experience like there at Georgia Tech? Tell us about, like, your class, your workload for class, and just the experience of being at Georgia Tech.
I mean, to be completely honest with you, Georgia Tech was the best way I can describe it. It was a place that pushed my mind to the brinks of what it was capable of. That's
Mm,
like the most positive way I can describe it. So the environment was definitely, especially when you choose. So they have majors, so multiple different majors in all colleges. The
right.
pathway of electrical and computer engineering at Georgia Tech is like it's like one of the most elite pathways you can take inside of this school. So this environment has certain pathways, architecture, some of the other pathways that are really, really highly intense that ultimately figure out what you're made of really, really quickly. So within the first semester of Georgia Tech, you're going to figure out whether or not you're cut for this pathway or not really, really quickly. And it pushed the bounds instantly when I got there. But ultimately, I was still fresh out of St. Louis and I'm in Atlanta for the first time. So I
Yeah.
wasn't as adjusted to what that climate actually was. But I knew my mind had the ability to adapt to it. But I also was still wanting to experience Atlanta. So understanding Georgia Tech is an island in the middle of Atlanta. It's like Atlanta is
Okay.
this big, it's a very, I won't even say culturally diverse. It's a very African American driven environment
Yeah.
where Black people are highly successful. They really run a lot of the things that go on in an environment. And it's one of those things where you see success in all different ways. Georgia Tech itself is like, it's a huge thing in Atlanta, but it's ultimately like this island that kind of is separated from the actual culture of Atlanta in a certain kind of way. So
Mm,
for me, being a part of the Black community in Atlanta, I mean in Georgia Tech, it was like, okay, we're on this island. But for me, I'm coming from St. Louis in the community where I'm around all Black people all the time. So I come to Georgia Tech and now I'm in this bubble. And then this bubble is a little bit different. And so for me, I had to figure out how to find my cultural balance of, okay, I like being in this environment because it's doing stuff on my mind that I always wanted to do. It's helping present me the new perspective and all these different things. But there was things that I knew that were in the rest of Atlanta that I wanted to experience as well, which a lot of people at Georgia Tech don't step out of that bubble. Like it's you could probably imagine there's areas in Atlanta that some people that may come from certain backgrounds, they're not as comfortable in these types of environments. For me, it was actually more serving for me to go to, like I had one of my high school partners who graduated. We graduated at the same time. He went to Morehouse the same time I went to Georgia Tech. So I had the opportunity to go into the environment in the AUC in a very, very comfortable fashion in what most people that in Georgia Tech at that time had the ability to do, because without having people in the AUC, you really can't just go over there and kind of be in that environment. So for me, I had the opportunity, but I didn't have a car. So I hop on the MARTA, go to the West End, get off at the West End station. I'm walking up through the real Atlanta as the Georgia Tech student, and I'm just going through all this stuff. And it's one of those things for me, it was like very natural and organic because I'm coming from St. Louis where I rode public transportation in St. Louis too. And it's like you can see different things in those environments. So for me, the comfort was there with the city of Atlanta, but I had to figure out how to find my comfort in the environment of Georgia Tech. Eventually I found it, but the workload at Georgia Tech is intense. Like it's not your tip, especially when you're in certain pathways. Like when you're in electrical and computer engineering at Georgia Tech, it's extremely intense. I used to describe it as like having a full-time job plus overtime. Like maybe you got to work at least 50 to 60 hours a week just to stay above water in this mug. You want to be excelling in Georgia Tech, you might have to give it 65. You know what I'm saying? Like it's just that
wow.
real, especially in certain pathways. But the type of preparation I got in that environment, I can never downplay what it is. Like it taught me how to be an innovative thinker and how to actually adapt to just almost anything that's thrown in front of me as an engineer. Like it hardened me to be the type of engineer that I am, where I wanted to go in a certain pathway in engineering, and I knew that to be the type of engineer I wanted to be, I needed to be capable of adapting to almost any problem thrown in front of me. And that's what Georgia Tech
Mm,
really helped prepare me for, but at the highest level. So it prepared me from a perspective level, it prepared me from a network level. Like coming into this environment, it's multicultural. There's people from all over the world here. There's
mm,
people that are now running all the different type of corporations and businesses all over the world because it's preparing people to be just that. But it's about being able to network and build in those environments, but also being able to perform because it's a performance-based environment. So if you're not
right.
performing, you're not going to be able to survive here. So for me, I had to find the perfect balance because I still had to, like, I'm still living in Atlanta and there's a cost that comes along with living here. So I had to, given that I had some financial support going to Atlanta and Georgia Tech, given I didn't have everything. So I had to figure out how to also work a job, work multiple
Wow.
different jobs, and also still do this 60 hours plus a week of coursework and kind of maintain that. And that was always, I had to find that balance. It was just one of those things where I had to create a balance. And yeah, it was. I don't even like to call it difficult. I just know it pushed me to the bounds that allowed me to become hardened enough to be what I ultimately became as a professional. But I enjoyed my time there. I enjoyed the network that I had the opportunity to build. I enjoyed the experience and the knowledge that I gained, and I just enjoyed being able to grow in a city like Atlanta.
What type of support system did you have there? Were you part of any groups, any student union groups or anything like that? Like, when you describe like the hours that you had to put in as far as like your workload and the intensity of the studies, there's obviously some things like you're not going to get, right off. Like you go into a class, you start seeing it looks like Greek, you're like, oh man, what is this all about? But then you start searching for like, well, I gotta get some people around me who knows this stuff or who's been through this before, so maybe they can help me. Kind of, what was that whole process like, and what groups were you part of?
So I'll be transparent with you. When I first got to Georgia Tech, I did find myself in like what they call the BSO at Georgia Tech, the Black Student Organization. I spent some time in that environment for the early parts, like maybe the first semester, a little bit of the second semester when I was at Georgia
Mm,
Tech. But I quickly learned that there was very few people in. So like, there's a lot of Black people. Not let me say a lot. There was a decent amount of Black people at Georgia Tech,
hmm.
but there was a very small amount of Black people that were on the same pathway that I was on. So
Right.
there weren't like a decent amount of Black people at Georgia Tech are either athletes or in those kind of environments. Some may be in management or business and things of that nature.
Mm,
But when it comes to the engineering pathway, there are people inside of these pathways, but we're very few and far between. So inside of
gotcha.
the electrical and computer engineering pathway, I had one of my close to this day is one of my closest friends. His name is Vernell Woods. He's like, we've done amazing things in technology together. We had the opportunity to build some of our first companies together and things of that nature. But we
Nice.
literally were roommates from our sophomore year in Georgia Tech all the way throughout the whole time we were there. And I had somebody who was on the computer engineering pathway, while I was on the electrical engineering pathway that ultimately was dealing with some of the same types of things. So we had a really, really close brotherhood because I got to see the difficulties that he had to go through to survive and maintain in the environment. He got to see the same thing that I was going through to maintain. And we had a different pathway because ultimately, like, well, my friend Vernell, he was a full ride student at Georgia Tech, so he had the opportunity to get what they call the president scholarship, and I got to have a friend who had a different level of exposure to the environment of Georgia Tech, which ultimately allowed me to see some of the differences and how you have to operate to get to the highest level of this space. But ultimately, I had some really good relationships, but I also had a student aid, I mean a student, what do you call this, a work study job that was in the financial aid office at Georgia Tech, which kind of helped me a decent
Mm,
amount. And then there was also other organizations that I was in. So there was another organization called the Music Production Enclave. This was a group of guys that just like making music and beats, and this was something that was more of a everybody in there was in different majors and things of that nature, but it actually gave me like a community that allowed us to kind of have something to breathe and relax in while we were inside of Georgia Tech. And we all like making music and talking about music and stuff like that. So that was kind of like a release space for me inside of the Georgia Tech environment. And then luckily I had my friend from St. Louis who went to Morehouse, which I had some amazing relationships with the guys that he kicked it with over there. So I kind of had like I had a healthy balance of the things that I needed to keep myself kind of balanced out. But ultimately, by the time my third year in Georgia Tech, when it came to my studies and just doing what I had to do to maintain in my major, I was in the library by myself reading. I was doing my research in the library, locked in, just figuring out what it took to make it make sense for me. Because you learn really quickly at Georgia Tech that you do a lot of group projects, you do a lot of kind of group and collective work, but there are certain things that once you're in it, like you're gonna man up, put the big boy breeches and boots on, and kind of buckle down and do it, or you're gonna figure out that this isn't the place for you. So I just put on
yeah.
the boots and just kind of locked in after my second, third year and just did what I had to do to continue to be in the environment, thrive and strive.
Nice, nice. And that's and I ask these type of questions, more for not only to understand, kind of like your background and everything like that, but also for our audience, especially if there's younger people that are in college right now that might view these podcasts and they're just like, what did this person do in order to, get by? Some of them may feel isolated, and they might not know, who to turn to, where to go, and things like that. So giving a little insight into how you kind of navigate it will give that information on, pass that on to people who are watching and listening to this podcast. So
Of
thanks
course.
for that for sure. You've been around quite a few industries professionally, energy, government, and some others. Tell us a little bit about kind of what led to you choosing those paths. Like, let's start with the energy and let's go into into government.
For sure. So we can start with the energy. So, like I said, that was a pathway that I took while I was still in college. So Georgia Tech had a program was called the Cooperative Education Program. The Cooperative Education Program in Georgia Tech, it gives you the opportunity to work a full-time semester, then go back to class for a full-time semester. You had to get
Right.
accepted into this program, and then you have to also get accepted into different basically different corporations that sponsor the program. They come in and it's not like just a traditional internship. It's more like you're actually a full-time employee for this company, and you start up like in a certain level. I came in as a project engineer, and I literally like built up my rapport with the company. I work with a
Mm-hmm.
company called Highline Engineering, so this is when I got the exposure to government contracting. Literally, I got to work with some really amazing professional engineers. One of the guys who led the company that I worked with, the company is called GDS, but I worked for the Highline subsidiary of GDS. So Highline was ran by a guy named Kevin Mara. He literally was kind of like a mentor to me once I got into the cooperative education program. And I had the opportunity for my second, third year at Georgia Tech. And going into my fourth year at Georgia Tech, I had the opportunity to work for really 4 semesters full time at a full-fledged engineering firm. And I started out helping write government contract proposals, eventually scaled up to start helping with different types of feasibility work and the research for those proposals. And then eventually I got to go into the field later on into my process and be a part of projects where we would go to military bases and they would take us in the areas where we would get to survey. They're doing different kind of projects to convert from overhead energy to underground and all this kind of stuff. I mean, I learned a lot in that time period. I learned about government contract proposal writing. I learned about success in government contracts. I also learned about the type of engineering that goes into the energy related projects. And I also learned a lot about that industry too. So the industry that I was in power, which I saw some amazing opportunities in there and I got to learn some amazing things. But for what I wanted to be as a professional, or at least what I saw myself becoming, I didn't think that that industry would lean heavily into the type of disruption I wanted to be able to do inside of technology. So when I was in the energy space, I kind of felt like I needed to make a pivot out of energy into something else that would allow me to spread my wings. Remember, I told you I was intrigued by Mark Zuckerberg when I'm 13 or 14 years old in the software
Right.
space. I get to Georgia Tech and I realized that, and the real thing that I learned about in electrical engineering, when you do when you do what they call feasibility work for power design, they come in and they say this is the stuff that they do before they build cities. This is the stuff that they do when they're redesigning cities and municipalities and military bases, all this kind of stuff. They come in and say, okay, how many people are going to potentially be in this area, or how many are already here? How many generators do we need to feasibly kind of serve energy to all these people? How many residential places are going to potentially be here? How many commercial places? All these different things, and you kind of survey things, and then they create what they call they basically create the grids that ultimately allow the power to flow through these places. And
Mm.
when you do that stuff, you realize that, hold on, these same grids are the same grids that they run for roads, they run them for water lines, but they also, outside of distributing energy, they're distributing the internet connectivity that allows us to have access to
Yeah.
computers, phones, and telephone lines and all that kind of other stuff. And I realized that this was the foundation of the stuff that allows computing to actually work. So this is how those towers that are put up that get you internet connection and all of this stuff flows on very similar pipelines. But the people that do the energy design projects are the people that kind of lay the foundation for all of this stuff. And that's the thing that I
Mm-hmm.
really learned. I was like, oh, so this comes in and it lays the foundation for everything else. And then I realized that everything else kind of stacks on top of the
Yeah.
accessibility of this stuff. So it opened my eyes up. But I knew that I kind of wanted to be in a different space. So I just learned a lot in that industry. But that was while I was still in college. That was even before I really went really crazy as a professional and started doing the things that kind of have created who I am to this day in the computing and the software space. And once I kind of converted over, it was just kind of like a new world. I kind of
Yeah.
saw opportunity from a totally different lens when I got into computing, hardware, and software.
BIT is always focused on forming new partnerships and opportunities to assist the community and our members with their continued professional growth and development. If you'd like to partner with us, send an email, inquiries@blacksandtechnology.net.
Yeah, I had a kind of a similar journey myself. I took computer network engineering in college. I went to a local community college, but engineering, the word engineering is the key, right? It's not the same as computer science. It's not the same as information systems. It's engineering, and engineering usually encompasses more low level. And I don't mean low level from the standpoint that it
You're
from
talking about foundational level.
I'm talking about foundational level, you know, computer chips and integrated circuits, all that stuff, right? Like that's the level. When I say low level, I'm talking about integrated circuits and circuit boards and all that stuff. That's what you end up learning, you know. So with me, it was like AC circuits, DC circuits, electronics, all that stuff. How to wire up circuits, using a breadboard, and how that all that,
Yeah.
all the low level programming languages and everything like that. So I realized, although I like learning that stuff, I realized like, well, I don't know if I want to do this for the rest of my life though. I don't know if I want to be replacing, integrated circuits or testing them to see if they're working correctly and things like that. Like, I don't know if that's a so that would, that's kind of what led me more into what I do now, which is more along the lines of DevOps engineering, computer administration, network administration, and engineering, that type of thing. So it's interesting that that's kind of like the same journey. Like you found out quickly, like, oh, this is different, and this is at a more base foundational level than what I want to be in, and so making that pivot, yeah, I
Yeah.
definitely understand that.
And then I would even say, I would add just a little bit there because the first thing when I say engineering, whenever I talk about engineers, I like to tell people that engineers are system designers. So engineers do the designs for the systems that actually are the things that make most of the stuff that we actually interact with and work with every day. No matter what lane they're in, they design systems.
Yep.
And for me in the power industry, for me, it wasn't even about it being because there was a lot of opportunity to do stuff. There's so much innovation that happens in power, but I also was like I said before, I was an entrepreneur before I was an engineer. So when
Mm,
I came into this space, I wasn't just looking to be an engineer. I was actually looking to be more of a industry leader. And I realized that to be an industry leader in power is very unlikely for you to have the ability to disrupt enough to become a leader in the industry that's been here for so long. So I
yeah.
saw things like I even saw stuff about like you could see the energy like you could see solar energy coming when I was in the industry. Like I saw the waves of solar energy coming and I saw how it was being forced to rely on everything else that was there. And I realized that like for me, it was more of a business-based decision why I left the energy space rather than just
Gotcha.
because I saw it as this industry that was so, I don't want to use the wrong word to describe it, but it was an industry that like prevented people that wanted to disrupt the opportunity to disrupt enough to
I
gain
know what
enough
you
opportunity from it. So I was just like, yeah, no, I think I should go somewhere else where if I want to be disruptive and innovative, I could be able to really truly benefit from doing all of those things and the work that comes along with it. So that's kind of what took me into the computing space more and the software space for sure.
Yeah, makes sense. I would say the energy field is a lot. Is at the time was probably a lot. I guess more mature,
Yeah,
and less likely to be disrupted with. We still have a lot of our here in America, a lot of our infrastructure is still based on a lot of the older technologies, and it's harder to disrupt that when you have that kind of traditional, long-standing,
yeah. I used to
industry
say
there.
it's called gray hair. They have like gray haired leaders inside of the energy industry
Right.
that they're not willing to bend and fold. They don't really like a lot of the stuff that's happening in the solar space right now. There's things and there's reasons
Mm,
why this stuff is all economically driven though. So it's just kind of like
I
telling
bet.
somebody that's been generating so much for so long that this can be more efficient, but efficient at what cost?
Yeah.
Costing me losing billions of dollars a year. I don't know if I want that efficiency. That's kind of
Yeah.
it's an interesting conversation. That topic can, what I'm saying, it's a
Yeah.
tricky one for sure.
Yeah, I've watched shows, documentaries on Nikola Tesla, and he was kind of in that situation where he was talking about, yeah, I have a way to generate free electricity, and Westinghouse was just like, nah, free?
Yo,
No, 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 no. How can we? You're talking about being able to wirelessly transmit energy to, because he had all these thoughts of being able to, utilize the earth conduct it and send electricity to different devices and things like that.
You're
And
going down a rabbit hole right now.
one of his backers were just like, yeah, so how do we generate revenue from that? How do we meter that? And he was just like, meter it? No, this is going to be free. Yeah, so let me talk to you for a second, Nicholas.
Exactly. Yeah, man.
It
You
ain't
did
gonna
that.
work.
That rabbit hole right there, and he didn't just have theory. A lot of this stuff was actually like he had the real like there. But I mean, there's people that actually do a lot of the stuff that he talked about. This is a deep rabbit hole though, so I don't want to get too deep into that one. Like it'll take us off course, you know. It'll take us off course in the conversation
For
because
sure,
that's a
for sure.
deep one for sure.
So you have some experience, or you have experience with geofencing technology, and tell us a little bit about, explain to the audience what geofencing is, and then tell us how you got into it and how that led to you founding your first company.
For sure. So yeah, so late in my career at Georgia Tech, my partner Vernell, who I was talking about previously, he was knee deep into a lot of high level just research projects in computing and software. So I kind of started working with him and some of the guys that he was working with in some of the research labs at Georgia Tech. And we're doing some really, really dope stuff at that time. At Georgia Tech, we had access to a lot of just really, really interesting research, and there was funding for different types of projects and things of that nature. So we had the opportunity to see some really cutting edge stuff before it was actually a market ready thing. Geofencing was one of those things that we had the opportunity to kind of explore, along with some other security based stuff. But geofencing was literally the thing that was the innovative backbone behind the first funded technology company I was a part of. So literally in our last semester at Georgia Tech, we had the opportunity to partner with, well, really TI was the person that invested in our company. So we basically had this platform, it was called Yopima, and he ultimately invested a decent amount of money in supporting my partner Vernell, who was at the lead of the company at that time. But I was literally just more focused on making my transition into the software space and the computing space. So we had done some stuff like hardware related. We built some supercomputers and all this kind of other stuff. But once we realized we wanted to like create a pathway, we realized that software was probably going to be the way. So we wanted to figure out, okay, well, what can we do that's innovative in software that allows us to kind of differentiate the platform that we wanted to create? We were seeing social media. Remember, we're still inspired by the social media era. So this is 2011, 2012. This is when Facebook is really starting to gain momentum. Companies like Facebook and Twitter, they're starting to balloon and blossom in different ways. And we're completely inspired by the social media transition and disruption in the space. So we created a social platform called Yopima that basically was focused on letting people know. We lived in Atlanta too, which is the mecca like clubs and parties and entertainment and all this stuff. So this the platform that we built was literally focused on letting people know how many girls and guys were at a club or a show or an event before you go there. So you can look at Yopima and kind of check what's the temperature at the place before I go. So it was just kind of this thing that was kind of a cool, you know what I'm saying, a cool implementation of some the geofencing technology that we used was basically you have our app on your phone when you get here. I don't know if you remember some of those early apps that you used to like do check-ins when you go to places and
Yeah,
stuff
yeah,
like
yeah,
this. Our
yeah.
app was like one of those first that was like a silent check-in. So you get to a club or you get to a music show or a bar or something of that nature. If you have our app on your phone, it basically with the technology that we created, it would basically just let people know there's another guy here, there's another girl here. There was other components to it, social components that we built into the application, but that's what allowed the entertainment industry want us to support us in that application. We ultimately did some really high impact stuff, but that technology was there was a lot of things that we had to learn from a business perspective. We were really good engineers, we were really good at finding innovative things and creating innovative stuff and working with high level technology to do dope stuff. But there was things in business that, given that we were starting in Atlanta, there was things that we didn't understand completely about the scalability of an infrastructure of innovative technology like geofencing when the infrastructure wasn't designed for it yet. Like this was still very early. There weren't geofence bubbles all over the place like they are now. So we were doing this stuff very early, and we were literally we went on tour with Tip, Two Chains, and Wayne, and we were like literally going to different cities, creating geofences at clubs and bars, and doing them at shows and stuff like that, and physically making geofences that would ultimately be at certain locations that would activate for our apps. And we did that for quite some time, and we had the opportunity to build, but ultimately the cost of the business started to be like the cloud infrastructure cost for that business, given that we were maintaining and managing these geo fences ourselves on our own data infrastructure. It started costing a hefty amount. And that was ultimately the thing that kind of one of a few different things, but ultimately that thing was kind of the biggest thing that ballooned the business into a way where it was almost not manageable for us to operate with that innovative technology, given that the rest of the landscape of technology wasn't ready for what we were
Wasn't
doing at the time. So we had
Gotcha.
to pivot out of that, but ultimately we still had the patents. We got patents for creating for comparative methods around geofencing. So basically anything that kind of tells you how many people are at a specific location. This is the same data they use in different apps and advertisers and things of that nature right now. That ultimately that patent kind of is just extremely relevant in today's time currently based off of the way that people use
Nice.
geofences to do things. But yeah, that was kind of my introduction to technology as a software developer and things of that nature. And we did some amazing stuff, but ultimately we kind of pivoted out of that and then started just doing other things after. But it was definitely a great introduction to the industry. It introduced us to entertainment. It introduced us to high level tech business and a number of different things. So that was a great start.
Nice, nice. So did you all just end up shutting the company down? Did you exit, or like how did
And we
that?
definitely could shut the company down. So the company basically phased, but ultimately, since we had the patent, the company still basically has some intellectual property that has extreme value. So while that
Very
software
nice.
platform cost a lot of money, maintaining that entity with that infrastructure, with that IP, ultimately is something that kind of has permeated in a number of different ventures that we've created since then. But ultimately,
Nice.
given that we were some of the first people to kind of do some innovative work in the geofencing space, it always kind of creates different opportunities for us to kind of bring that patent up in different type of things over time. So it's always been something that's been relevant, but that business we did phase it out and started focusing on other
Gotcha.
things.
Gotcha. And I think that's even just a good nugget right there. Just when people are thinking about creating companies and understanding their intellectual property, whether it's a patent, whether it's a trademark, whether it's a copyright, or like whatever, it's important, right? Like you do something, you have a logo, you have a brand, or what, do the legal stuff. People. I remember a friend of mine told me when I started Blacks in Technology. For me, Blacks in Technology has always been like the safe space for technologists, engineers could come, and we can create this community. So I was just hardcore, engineer, technology. And this person told me that, you need to get you a marketing person and you need to get you a lawyer. Like, it's one of the first two things that you should get. And I didn't early on. I didn't listen. And I've gotten burned by that. But it's since then I've gotten those things and everything like that. But for all the people who are talking about starting a business or pursuing a business venture or anything like that, legal is important because they are going to protect that intellectual property
Oh, for sure.
that you have. Well, and I know the patent process is not an easy process at all.
Yeah, we were
Uh,
blessed. We were
yeah,
really blessed at Georgia Tech. We got some so we had a law firm called Foley and Lardner that was a former Georgia Tech alumni who had worked on a lot of different patent work and for different companies you name them they worked on stuff with them. So we ultimately had the opportunity to work with Foley and Lardner to pursue our patents. They were still working. They ultimately helped us get through the full process. And that was some of the best support that we could have had because they helped us get that IP that helped us differentiate the company. But yeah, the marketing, luckily we had the entertainment industry that helped us a lot too when we had a celebrity come in and invest in our company. So there was a lot of things that kind of benefited us early in our career as engineers that were very focused on being businessmen. We just knew that we had engineering skills. We needed to do the other things that could help polish us as businessmen and people that kind of understood the balance. Like I always was focused on the balance. Like it was never about me just being an engineer and not understanding what my output was actually creating, what it could create for myself, and just really allowing my gift to kind of open the different doors for me and always being aware of this. So yeah, legal and marketing and branding, these are things that are critical. No matter even if you're just an engineer yourself, like you still want to properly brand yourself because there could come a time if you're working for another corporation or something of that nature, and if you're not properly branding yourself as who you are, there could be a chance where your experience and knowledge that they actually taught me that in the engineering firm that I work with too. They always told me make sure that you everything that you do, you document it properly and make sure that it's a part of the narrative of who you are as a professional. Don't downplay the value of your resume. Don't downplay the value of your networking experience, because those things actually create more of a way for you than even just having a certain amount of knowledge at certain times. Because that validation is the thing that makes your experience bring stuff that just knowing something or having a degree can't validate.
Yeah, that's 100%, man. I definitely feel that. You know, so you started your first company. You know, I know there's a lot of lessons learned and a lot of bruises, bumps and bruises and things. Tell us a couple of like lessons that you learned, a couple of the successes and failures that you had.
For sure, man. So, payment, like I said, we did have to pivot out of that because we scaled, like it just scaled, and when the infrastructure wasn't prepared for that, was probably one of the first really hard lessons that we learned in technology, or that I learned primarily. So then eventually, like I wanted to immerse myself in more experiences that could, because understanding that I didn't go back to college to get an MBA or get any of this other stuff. I focused in college on developing innovative engineering skill sets, and I knew that for me, as somebody who was always an entrepreneur, I knew that the best way for me to get business knowledge was to just keep dumping myself into business experiences and using my knowledge to kind of get access to more of the stuff that I felt like would allow me to be a more polished business person. So I would say, just over the whole duration of me working in Atlanta, probably later on in our career, I was a part of starting a mobile phone company. It was called Moolah. We started a phone company and we built out some software that allowed phones to kind of be monetized. So basically, there was an ad system that we built into mobile devices. We started this in 2016, and there was a lot of stuff that we learned when we started that company, that ultimately let me know that some industries are much more difficult to penetrate than others. And the war stories that come along with trying to get into the telecom industry, from a technology perspective, are countless. Literally, the company that we started was just recently it's just crazy things that come along with it. But we get other partners, they come in and their intentions are in one way, and we're focused on innovating, and things just kind of don't always align properly. And these were things that me and my partners that were building those companies had to deal with consistently. And we started that in 2016, and those war stories and wars still come to this day. Like we literally that company Moolah that we started as a mobile company, that my partner Vernell, he took it into the telecom industry completely and started selling phone service and all these different things and devices. And there's just a lot of difficult things that come with navigating industries like telecom, that you just have to be resilient to stay in those industries, because the resilience that comes along, like the amount of resistance that you get, the amount of people that want to either take what you have or reshape what you've created to make it their own thing, and it's just difficult to navigate different industries when you're coming from something like we're software experts. So me and my IV, we're in the software and the computing space. We do dabble into the hardware space as well. Like we spent a lot of time in all of these spaces, but knowing that the telecom industry is the thing that's like been here for even longer than the devices. Those mobile devices are here, but the industry has been here for so long that when these mobile devices come in and start disrupting, it's a certain way that they expect companies like Apple and Samsung to interface with the telecom industry, and they play a certain kind of way. And we happen to be in the mix of being one of those players that were like interfacing with telecom from a mobile technology and hardware perspective, and just like I don't like going down that rabbit hole of stuff is just crazy. But ultimately, I would say that the experience that we gained, the experience I gained being in those spaces was just, I can't put a dollar amount on it. I just know that I learned how to operate in manufacturing at the highest levels. I learned how to operate at software at the highest levels, because I went from building one or two apps here and there and like doing different application projects to running a team where we're building and managing 7 to 8 apps at the same time that are a software suite that go in a firmware system. That also, if you can see behind me, these are some of the devices that I created. Like I created multiple tablets in 2023. So I built 3 tablets, 2 mobile phones, and led a team that we did all of that stuff. So that was something that it was a journey to get to that place, but it ultimately taught me so much about business in a way that like there's not a dollar sign that you can put on it. So I would say the experience that comes along with those war stories are the things that I choose to dwell on more now than anything, because now I'm in a totally different place in an executive, as an experienced like developer, innovator, all of those kind of things. So now I just kind of focus on using the experience to really be more of a vessel in the vehicle, and also to do some of the things that I'm focused on doing going into the future. But yeah, man, it definitely comes with bumps and bruises. But I'm very rough and rugged from all of those kind of experiences, just to be completely
Yeah.
honest.
Do you have a product or service that you would like to share with the BIT audience? Or maybe you'd like to support the BIT community and do your part in helping us with stomping the divide? Start by sponsoring one of our podcasts. Please email us at contactus@blacksintechnology.net.
Yeah. I have a friend that he's out of Austin, Texas. He deals with like open source technologies, and he's told me some of the stories that some of these telecom folks that he's involved with, right? Like, and I can't recall exactly what he was doing, but it involved some of these telecom companies, and like he always tells me how much like they are pissed at him, right? Like, because he'll call them out on certain things. On, they say they operate one way, and then you kind of get into the nitty gritty of it, and they don't actually operate like that, or they try to hold things back and things like that. So he's told me some stories where I'm just like, man, that's they cutthroat over there, man.
Yeah, man, it's shark infested waters for sure, man, for sure.
Tell us about. Let's talk about on another world experience.
For sure.
That's your XR company.
For sure.
For one, tell the folks like what XR is, and then let's talk a little bit about like why you chose to go into the XR space.
Sure. So first, XR, it stands for extended reality. It's the umbrella that includes what most people know about is augmented reality, kind of those filters and all the layovers and stuff that you do on social media. Then the next lane is virtual reality, which is like, like I got a few VR headsets back here. Those are some of the prototypes that I have for the company. But ultimately, there's VR headsets that are like Oculus, MetaQuest, Apple Vision Pro, and then there's a version that's called mixed reality, which is that's kind of the next frontier. Apple Vision Pro is more of a mixed reality device, and the MetaQuest 3, they're mixed reality devices, but they actually lean heavily into virtual reality. So all three of those are three different umbrellas that fall under the extended reality umbrella, and ultimately this is basically the next frontier of media. So if we want to be completely transparent about immersive media, it's the I like to like give a quick like historical timeline of what's happened in media. So we started there was it was just oral tradition in the beginning. Like people just moved communications and stuff around story. It was oral. Eventually they got to this form where they kind of got physical written stuff. You start carving stuff out in tabs. You got written languages and letters and stuff like that. Now you got stuff that you can kind of record stuff. Then we transitioned from written stuff to audio formats that can kind of like take your audio and vocal stuff and kind of put it on radio transmissions and 8 tracks and records and all of these different things. And
Yeah,
those all eventually evolved into CDs and all this other stuff. We eventually got the visual stuff where you got TVs and all this other stuff. And now we have digital stuff, so we got streaming that kind of has taken all of that video and audio stuff that was traditional and kind of put it in a more quick consumption format, so you don't need the same physical apparatuses to access all of this stuff. But now we're in another cuspice of transition to media that it really has been happening for a few years, really for a decent amount of years now, but it's a very slower transition because the other formats that we've been using for so long, people have just grown accustomed to them. So right now, this transition from the more traditional digital media formats to now this immersive media format that would be mixed reality and virtual reality, this stuff is happening right now in front of us. So as somebody who's always been passionate about innovative technology and making innovative creations, so like being an innovative thinker and an innovative business mind, I saw the immersive media space. Like I've known about it for years, but I knew that like one of the things I really learned with Yopima that I can probably bring into this now is that if you innovate too much too fast and the infrastructure of business isn't there for you while you're innovating, you end up in a very, very tough space from a business perspective. Because if you innovate 5 steps ahead of the market and you just did all this crazy innovation, then now the business and the rest of the market is not ready for all this stuff that you made. And now you're dealing with cost of trying to bring something that's innovative back to the market, which never serves anybody's business well. So for me, what I learned in that experience is that while I've known about immersive technology and mixed reality and virtual reality tech for quite some time, I knew that it wasn't the timing for me to take myself into that innovative space. So for me, I literally was like, all right, I think now is a much more I think it's a good time. Like I was inspired to move into the immersive media space in 2023, at the end of 2023, and really I kind of wanted to figure out what my idea and concept was. This was after I had worked in a company called OK Play when I moved out here to Cali, which ultimately was a gaming company for children that ultimately I had the opportunity. They sold that company in like 2 years. So I was one of the first engineering hires on that team. That company sold. I got to work in this other company called Dapper Labs, one of the biggest NFT companies in the world. Working for those two companies gave me this insight that I didn't get the opportunity to get when I was living in Atlanta and working in technology. When I moved here to California, and I got to tell this story now because it's why I'm actually doing what I'm doing in the immersive media space. So those two companies were extremely critical for my growth and development as an executive, but it was really from a engineering perspective that I had the opportunity to learn this stuff. So with OK Play, I had the opportunity to work with some amazing people out here that were all Silicon Valley and California based tech executives and professionals that had done a lot of successful things in technology. They gave me the opportunity to come into the team and help them build out Android technologies in the early process of them building that application. Me working with them, I got to learn some amazing things. I got to learn how to be successful at selling a technology company, but also how to build a culture that was conducive to building a team that could build a highly successful technology business. I also got to work with people that had already done it before. Everybody that I was working with, 10 to 15 years my senior, maybe 5 to 10 years my senior, but they ultimately had the opportunity to teach me things because I had engineering skills that could help what they were looking to get accomplished. But they also had knowledge and insight on what does it take to build a company and sell it. And what does it take to build a company and raise the capital to build it? What does it take to build a company and build a team and a culture that can then we actually they started the company in 2020. So the pandemic hit while the company was getting ready to launch. They still knew how to navigate the waters of a pandemic to build a mobile technology company, grow it, scale it, get over 500,000 kids on the platform during the pandemic, and then ultimately be able to sell the company to to $1 billion NFT company. So when I was a part of the process pre-product launch. And I got to see it all the way through exit and liquidation. And when I got to be a part of that full process and I saw the camaraderie of that team, I saw the culture of that company, and I saw the leadership that allowed me to see things that I did not have the opportunity to see while I was doing business in Atlanta. And working with them and selling to that $1 billion NFT company, I learned some really, really interesting things as well. I've known about the blockchain space and the innovator and the crypto space for years as well. There was a reason why I didn't go directly into that industry because I knew that it was extremely volatile. Even though it was innovative, it was so volatile that it didn't make sense for me to dive deep into that based off of what I understood from a business perspective. But when I had the opportunity to work with Dapper Labs, and I saw that there wasn't as much volatility working with a company who had a partnership with the NFL already, who had a partnership with the NBA, who was the licensed NFT provider for these companies and a lot of other large scale entities. So it made it more comfortable for me to want to work with an NFT company, but they also let us come in and build out the first mobile technology for their whole company. So they had no mobile tech, everything was web based and all of this stuff. And they brought our team in and we had built some really dope mobile tech, and they brought us in and said, "Hey, we need to build mobile tech, and we don't have any yet. And you all just made some mobile stuff. Can you all bring in your mobile?" So it was really an acquisition where they phased out maybe about 80 to 90% of the company and kept some of the executives as well as the guys who were building the technology, which was me and a group of about three other guys. We came in and became the lead mobile team for Dapper Labs, and I had the opportunity to work on really high level projects for about 6 to 7 months before the NFT market took another dip and that company had to let some people go. And for me, I was already I was already past wanting to be in that infrastructure, but I saw it as an opportunity to work on some really high level stuff. So I was like, okay, cool. So they gave us a severance and said, hey, we got a downside, and I was like, it's perfect. That was right before I was about to get married. So my wedding was a few months later, and I was like, all right, cool. That was the motivation that I needed to get back into the entrepreneurial space and get back focused on building something and innovating in a way that would allow me to use that experience in a more beneficial way. That ultimately took me back to the mobile company where I did all that stuff in 2023 that I talked about. And eventually gaining those hardware experiences, it kind of motivated me to want to get into the VR and XR space. That's how I got to the place of wanting to start a not just $1 million VR company, but I want to build a $1 billion VR tech company that has the IPO potential that I feel like the insight that I got working at all of these companies kind of leans heavily into. And these are things that I'm saying just people can say a lot of things. I'm more like, no, I just got out of $1 billion NFT company and they brought us in to build a department that ultimately built a new wing of their business. And it showed me things that as a young, growing innovative tech entrepreneur, that things that gave me insight that I feel like I know what it takes to kind of do. And I know it's not an easy process, but I do know that right now that insight led me want to go into this immersive tech space because I see it as the next frontier of media. And that's kind of what brought me to OAW. And OAW, I guess I could talk a little bit about that now.
Yeah, yeah, for sure.
On Another World Experiences. Well, it's going to be On Another World Experiences in Technology. It's a premium immersive entertainment company, or entertainment and experiences company. So what we're doing is creating solutions that will allow people all around the world that either have commercial real estate vehicles or that have spaces that they want to provide immersive technology as a solution to make it more accessible, but also making it more private and safe for people. So the sweet science of One Another World is that while most of the other competitors in this space currently focus primarily on gaming, if you go to almost any VR entertainment space, it's more arcade based, like a sandbox or zero latency. These companies are very much so, they are quite somewhat successful in the things that they're doing, but they focus primarily on gaming based experiences, which I feel like limits what this frontier media actually can become. So our spaces are meant to be something that allows people to explore it in a much more open fashion. You don't have to come in here and think that you just had the ability to play a zombie shooter in an escape room. You can do a number of different things in our verticals, and it will allow that accessibility and comfort, and also make it more readily available. So our models are meant to make the technology much more accessible. I don't want to give too much about what that
Yeah,
accessible
yeah,
means in
no,
this
yeah,
conversation, but
yeah.
it's definitely that's the sweet science
Don't
of,
give away
what
the
we're
secret
doing.
sauce.
Yeah, so that's the sweet science of it. So we're actually looking, we're in the process of starting our first capital raise now. We spent all of 2024 doing the building the foundation of it. So I got my manufacturing partnership and relationship. I started building some of the initial software we need for the software suite that we're building. We also did our first commercial real estate deal that's going to be for our first flagship pilot location that will be opening in St. Louis later on this year. And ultimately, yeah, we built some of those initial partnerships. I built a founding team that I feel will align to the culture that we're looking to have on Another World. I have one of my partners who's heavily in real estate and development, and I have a couple of my other guys. One of my guys in education, one of my guys in community engagement and development. So we ultimately have built a team that's kind of leaning very heavily into. I have tech experience and knowledge, and my other counterparts in this company, who are all my friends of 15 to 20 plus years. They just have experience in different lanes. It allows us to kind of have a really, really strong base of what we need to take On Another World to another world, honestly.
The BIT Foundation has established featured partnerships and programs with companies such as Amazon, AT&T, CompTIA, Techstars, and more to provide our members with the resources we want and need to thrive and succeed in this tech ecosystem. To learn more, visit foundation.blacksintechnology.net.
Nice, man. That sounds super exciting. I'm ready. I'm ready to see it.
Appreciate it.
Yeah, yeah. And I don't see a ton of Black people in that space as creators. Like I see them utilizing, other platforms and doing things within that platform, but not actually creating the platform itself. So this is very, I would say monumental. And
Appreciate
I
it.
would also say, like, you're probably going to get, like, once this episode drops and people within the bit community see this, they're gonna want to holler at you because, you know we need to be, and I'm saying, like, just saying, from a standpoint of, like, when is your platform going to drop? How can we, when it drops, can contribute to it, or what have you? Just I love seeing folks, like, within our community, collaborate, and have outlets and spaces like this, where they can, connect and make things happen. So I know there's already folks that are in this space, in the community. And so, once this episode drops, I'd love to see folks, like, connect with you and share ideas and see where this whole thing can go. But yeah, that's dope. So, AI is a big thing right now. How is that playing a role in what you all do?
All right, cool. So, I mean, AI, like, So just to give another caveat, the amazing thing about being in Georgia Tech, I got to learn about AI in 2010, 2011. Like I was doing research projects on AI. Like I literally have like PowerPoint presentations of projects that I was doing, studying the history of AI in 2010. So I've been
Wow.
aware of AI for years. I knew that it was going to eventually become more commercialized with more of the data infrastructure to empower it came to life, and more of the hardware infrastructure required for it came to life,
Yeah.
which now over time it has now got there. But for me, as somebody who's always been like I'm a knowledge and information junkie. So like I literally, like I said, I walked to the library when I could get on the internet when I was a kid. I always was interested in having more access to information and wasn't constrained to like any one thing. That's if somebody told me I couldn't learn something, I knew that there was probably a book or something out there to get access to it. So for me, AI has been like it's almost like a supercharger for my brain. Like I use it in so many different ways. I could talk about a million AI platforms that I use. Of course, I use Chat GPT, and I use a couple of like visual platforms like Mid Journey and things of that nature. Like I kind of use it in a little bit of everything. I use it for like
Yeah.
so like I have platforms to create documents and like create frameworks for branding materials and all this kind of stuff. So for me, AI is just a supercharger tool. I look at it as like a super tool for me. And for
Gotcha.
me, it kind of integrates in almost the way that I operate and do everything as an executive, as an entrepreneur, as an innovator. It just kind of like it's like that super tool that I use for. It's almost like a Swiss Army knife. And I just kind of pull it out when I feel like it's going to enhance what I'm trying to get accomplished right now. A lot of people ask me about AI, and I just tell them, man, like learn about prompting and figure out how to make it make sense for something that you're already doing and spending a lot of time on, because
Yeah.
it's literally whatever you need it for, you can kind of figure out how to implement it. A lot of people are fearful of AI. They say it's like deleting jobs and stuff like that. It's not going to delete your job if you know how to use it. Like if you know how to
Right.
use it properly, all it's going to do is make you more efficient at doing something that like it's an efficiency tool in my opinion. So I used to be more efficient, honestly.
Are you? Do you have any plans on integrating it into the XR space? And
Oh, yeah, of course. Like, so that's why I was talking about the image generation stuff. There's so many components of AI that we're going to use to integrate. Like, there's a component of creating VR worlds and creating VR experiences that can be highly influenced by AI. So now you can
mm,
rapidly create immersive worlds, rapidly create immersive games and things of that nature. Not just games, but like there's education components, there's mental health, and like there's different types of components that AI lean heavily into that
yeah.
can kind of take the VR and the immersive media space to frontiers that I'm definitely working to unlock a lot of those things right now. I'm actually building a few VR apps right now that lean heavily into using AI for some of the generative stuff, as well as components of just kind of like having a level of interaction that can help people kind of navigate stuff more effectively and learn more effectively.
Nice. Nice. So I know you're part of a couple of other ventures. DNY Enterprises, Camp Fan. Tell us a little bit about those two.
All right, for sure.
Uh,
So DNY,
yeah.
I got you. DNY Enterprise, that's my service vehicle. So I've had probably three consulting firms over my journey in tech for the past 15 years. DNY Enterprises, it literally is a family-based business for me. So D is my name, Y is the first initial of my wife's name. We call it DNY Enterprises because I'm building it for the legacy of my family. And I really just figured
So
out how to build systems to capstone all the experience that I just talked to you about and make it in a way for me to make profit from having systems that help entrepreneurs, business owners that want to be more effective at using technology as an asset for their business. What I do is I help people all around the world. Like I have some clients out in Africa. I have people all over America that I help and build things. But ultimately I come in and I take people through what I call a vision to venture service. It's like a four-step process where I help people itemize and clear their vision out. After they clear out the vision and we go through that process, I help them really understand what is it going to take to build the technology that's going to help your business, and how does it align with the goals of your business. So I got like this project planning service that we offer, and then I go into project management and development. Like I've developed so many things that I don't let people come to me and say, like, people can't pay me to develop an app in 2025. It's not a, hey Dennis, can you develop or can you help me build this app? I'm not in the business of building people's apps anymore. I'm in the
right.
building in the business of helping people be successful with technology business. And typically most people don't know what they require. So my service is more of a
Yeah.
coaching and consulting service. So I kind of
Mm,
consult and help people understand. First of all, you have to have a clear runway before you start building technology and just thinking it's going to make sense. You got to build something that'll actually allow that technology to be an asset to a business, because technology itself is not a business. Technology is a tool and a resource to a business.
yeah.
Now, there's components to technology that you have to manage like a business, like those costs that I was talking about in your PIMA. Not understanding business properly enough, we got costs that balloon the technical infrastructure, and now this thing is burdening down our whole business. So I spend a
Yeah.
lot of time helping the people that I work with understand how to connect the dots between the technology and the business ideas and the problems that they're trying to solve. And then like the fourth step, I said we go do project management and development. So we offer a few different services there where we can bring in. I have contractors that work with me all around the world. We help people build technology, hardware, software, websites, whatever you want to need to build that you feel like aligns with the goals of your business. And then I help people kind of strategize on what is it going to take to make this sustainable. So whether you want to raise some capital, whether you want to bootstrap, and how you're going to strategize to make this bootstrapping process make sense. But we take people through pilots to get them some data and then figure out what's going to make the most sense for how they want to grow the business. And DNY Enterprises, that's our core service. We also offer courses that I created that ultimately help bring youth and as well as seniors and stuff like that into the tech space. So really introducing kids to technology in ways that make sense. We kind of introduce kids to technology via gaming and applications, because that's kind of their first introduction to it. So we
Right.
walk them from gaming and the core apps that they like into how the business of all of it works, because these kids, they're living in this digital economy where they know stuff about money that people that in their age period, they probably, you wouldn't understand how much they understand about economy until they ask their mom and dad for some Roblox bucks or ask for some Minecraft cash or something like that. And once they
Yeah.
start doing that stuff, they understand economy. But I also walk them back to from that gaming and application all the way to how this is infused with math and science and artistic work and creative elements and components. And that's kind of how our course teaches kids how to stop looking at technology as just something to consume, but also how to see it as a world of opportunity, specifically coming from our communities. Given that I live out here in California, I've learned a lot of things about the tech industry. I also learned that if we just look at the percentages of the biggest tech companies in the world and how many people that come from communities that are predominantly minority driven, you'll see that there's still a very small percentage. While the number and the percentages are growing, it's still a smaller percentage of people from our communities in these industries. One of
Yeah.
those things has to do with the visibility of people like ourselves being more in their face and allowing them to understand that it's possible, but also really just knowing that they have to be taught the pathways to get into the technology industry. Like it's not a thing where you just can jump knee deep in here. You need to kind of like walk your way into understanding those value propositions. And then also the work, as you would know, it takes, like if you go into the tech industry without being driven properly, you need to have some type of purpose-driven thing that allows you to have the persistence that's required to learn what it takes. Whether you even, if you want to
Yeah.
be a coder or a developer, it takes a lot of persistence. But even if you want to be a
Yeah.
salesperson in tech, or if you want to be a marketer in tech, or if you want to be a legal person in tech, there's things that you have to have a level of passion for and a purpose-driven kind of motor for to develop those skills. But we have to help our community at an earlier phase. So that's what I built these courses for. Also built it to kind of help senior citizens that want to be more engaged in technology, because that disconnect between the current youth generation and the older generation that technology is building,
Yeah.
that bridge needs to be closed. But if people like ourselves or like yourself don't kind of help bridge the gaps between the older generations and the next generation that's already engraved in this stuff, it's just going to continue to build this thing that I don't think is healthy for our community. So that's why I built the courses to introduce and bring people into the community of technology, but also to help kind of close that gap. And then the other thing I do offer is public speaking services. So I do public speaking. I'm looking to scale my public speaking into 2025 and kind of being more focused on just kind of being more vocal about some of the things that we're discussing here. So
Yeah.
that's DNY Enterprise in a nutshell. It's literally meant to be like a Swiss Army knife of me taking my experience, knowledge, and networking tech, and really just helping serve all businesses. But I really love helping under resource and under just people that come from communities that don't typically have access to this stuff. And I really want to help people that have either professional experience in other industries figure out how to take advantage of technology when it comes to scaling and growing their business. The other business, Camp Fam Productions, that's a family-based organization as well. That's something that I built with my immediate family, my brothers and my parents. We built out this thing. It's going to be a media company basically. That's going to have to do a number of different things. So I have an animated series that we're producing that's going to kind of tell the story of a futuristic world that kind of brings it's borderline sci-fi, but it's going to be much more relatable to our community. It's almost imagine like a fusion of I'm gonna say it now, but people are going to be inspired by this idea. But imagine the fusion of the Boondocks and the Jetsons. Imagine that type of fusion.
Yeah,
But something that's totally, yeah, that's meant to really inspire and make it more relatable. A lot of the stuff that we're talking about, the characters of the show are based loosely around me and my brother's personas because we're all very different, but we all have a tie that brings us together. So it's really a family-based show, but there's a number of other things we're doing under that umbrella. Just like from a creative component, like as you can say, like I can talk about technology all day, but there's creative things that I feel like I need to do to make sure that I'm making my story more relatable and accessible to people in our community. So I create music that ultimately kind of paints a very clear picture of just who I am authentically. My brother, he does spoken word, so we kind of put all of our creative things, and he's also an educator too. So my brother's an educator, but he does spoken word. I'm a tech executive and innovator, but also make hip hop music. And we kind of create this umbrella Camp Fan production that kind of allow us to put our creations in that thing to ultimately bring some life to our family long after we'll be here. So that's kind of the plan of what Camp Fan Productions is focused on.
man, you are the epitome of giving back. You reach back and man, putting the family on like that's incredible. Like
I
that is
appreciate it.
incredibly inspiring, man. And I love that you touched on because I used to do music,
Mhm.
right? Hip hop music,
Okay.
right? So
I see the Wu
you
Tang
know,
in the back. I see
yeah,
what's
yeah,
going on.
Wu Tang's for the children. But so there was a early 2000s a pretty robust hip hop scene here in Cincinnati. We've got cats like High Tech, um,
Mhm.
producer, and him and Quali. Of course, Quali is from New York, but he really got a lot of his start here in Cincinnati. So like it was this huge group of people who kind of grew up in the hip hop scene together, and we all knew each other and everything like that, man. But I had this other persona in tech, and the two didn't merge for a long time. Like I wouldn't even tell folks like it, in my professional setting that I did music, and it wasn't a thing of embarrassment. It was a thing of like I want people to take me seriously
Oh, for sure.
when it comes to my engineering skills. Like I don't want people looking at me differently and things like that. But as I got older, I stopped caring. Like it came a point where I realized like I'm not going to hide who I am. I see so many of these, other white people who have all these outside interests, and you read about them, and they don't care about touting what they do. Like one of the gentlemen, I always use him as an example. This gentleman named Jono Bacon. He was a community spokesperson or advocate for Ubuntu Linux, right? When it first came out. And this dude was part of like so I used to go to a bunch of open source Linux conferences and things like that. And he spoke at one of them one time, and I read up on him. And this dude was part of like this thrash metal band, right? Like so, and then I'm reading about him. I'm like, oh, he's part of a thrash metal band. Nobody cares, like nobody judges him for that, right? And then I seen this picture that was pretty profound for me. It was a picture of all these white PhDs, like they had PhDs in technology and computer science, and it was like a group of them just lined up side by side, and they all had like shorts, flip flops, t-shirts, just looking super normal, super regular, and everything like that. And I started like, man, like what? We don't have to. We don't have to put on a mask for
We don't have to
it,
conform.
we
Like,
don't need to conform, right? Like we can be who we are, and being who we are in this space and having this community, it's more of an inspiration than if I was to show up in a suit and tie all the time and acting as if oh like no hip hop music and no sport. No man, I love sports. I love basketball. I love football. I love hip hop. I grew up on hip hop. So why wouldn't I want to show that side of me and keep young people from, one thing I used to always run into when I first started Blacks in Technology is there used to be discussions around, all we want to do is be in sports and hip hop and music and blah 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 blah. From older people at the time. And I used to think, like, what's wrong with that? Like, what's wrong with us wanting to be in, in those types of industries? And they see that it's lucrative, for one, for some people who can make it, and two, that shouldn't prohibit them from anything else. Like, that's just a part of who they are, growing up in the environment that they grew up. But what we need to do is we need to show them an image of that plus this.
You can do both. Man, look,
You can
what
do
you're saying,
both.
you're literally talking into my core. Like the reason why I didn't say anything about the music stuff, I didn't say it to the end. Like I'm glad you asked me about Camp Fan Productions at the end because you just talked to me for an hour about technology, and I could talk
Yeah,
for 3 to 5 more hours about technology, and it could just keep going. But when I talk about my culture and my community, I understand like hip hop is the most authentic way to express ourselves. It is not we have to remember that the media conglomerates that marketed hip hop for years made it seem like there was only one way that you could be in hip hop, and there was only one demographic that they wanted to promote. Remember, hip hop started a certain kind of way, and it
yeah,
eventually in the 90s evolved into something else because they wanted a certain image to be portrayed from hip hop artists. And then remember in the early 2000s, that moment when Kanye West and 50 Cent had that head to head thing, and it was like,
yeah,
hold on, because like you were just talking about Kweli, there was artists like Kweli and Common and all these guys and there
yep,
wasn't until the moment when Kanye said, "Hey, you can be something different in hip hop," and put his head up against what 50 Cent, who 50 Cent, he's one of my favorite rappers, like literally one of my
yeah,
favorite artists, businessman. He's one of my favorites. But when they
yeah,
put Kanye against 50 Cent, you understand that Kanye inspired a whole generation of other artists who didn't want to portray that same image that was
yeah,
downplaying what the narrative of hip hop was being painted as during the 90s. It was like
yeah,
there was this thing that was in our community that was only portraying a certain thing that makes hip hop seem like it was just this negative thing, when hip hop was
yeah,
never just this negative thing. And most people that listen to hip hop know it was never just that. That's just what became mainstream publicized. For me,
yeah,
hip hop always was this place where I could hear the most authentic stories from my community. And it was a relatable way to do that. I spent years recording music before I ever talked about it. Like I literally, like when I lived in Atlanta, it was like in Atlanta, it was hip hop was just like playing basketball. It was just like going to the park.
yeah,
Like it's just like going to the club. Everybody just goes to studios, and it's like a regular thing that people do in their community because it's one of the most effective expression vehicles that we have in our community. Now it's on people like now because my moniker in hip hop, like I literally was moved just last year to actually create an album. Like I've been recording music for 10 plus years, like probably the whole time I was in Atlanta. I never was like, I want to release this music. It was always just a place where, and I spent years, like we had a studio in our house. Like I literally used to record all the time. But
yeah.
the thing about me not wanting to put it out was very much so aligned with the thing that you were talking about. I didn't want people to get distracted from the fact that I like making hip hop when I was trying to build my perfect. Now, it don't matter if I talk about my hip hop because you can't discredit everything else that I've done. So now I can
Exactly.
talk about all of this stuff and I can be free about it. But now I feel a level of freedom that I didn't have before. And in
Before.
2024, I started recording more music because I stopped the whole time I lived in California. When I moved to California, I stopped recording. It wasn't the same type of energy that I had. But at the top of 2024, the end of 2023, I got inspired to start writing stuff again. And then I eventually
Hmm.
wrote more records. And then eventually I got inspired with an album, a name for an album. I created a whole album that I'm still in the process of post-production for. But all of this stuff came at the time period when now it's like I'm perfectly fine being the artist that I want to be because I was inspired by artists like Jay-Z and Rick Ross and 50 Cent.
Yeah,
And these guys aren't just rappers. Like these guys are business moguls. They actually chose
yeah,
to say, yeah, I can rap. I can tell my story. I can tell where I came from. But I also can go run this multi-million dollar, billion-dollar company as well. Dr. Dre's. And like you see what these
same
guys are
thing. Yeah,
doing. So they have the capability of doing all this other stuff. It's just hip hop just happened to be the thing that allowed them to get in the industry. But for me, like my moniker in hip hop is Mr. Biz and Tech. Cause that's who I want to be. That's who I am actually. Like it's like more take me serious. I'm gonna put Mr. in front of it so you can take this serious. This is not a joke rap. This is serious
right.
music. I'm not making just party music and kicking music. No, this is the stuff. My album is called You Can't Unsee This. because once you hear it, it's one of those things where just like this conversation, when people hear it, you got a number of different ways you can process me. I know that it can push some people one way, it can push other people another way, but I do know that I'm just
Right.
going to be authentically who I am at all times, and the music itself is just a true embodiment of that, and it's meant to like make me more like bring a more relatable way of my narrative. Because I could write a book. I'm like, I don't want to write my book till I finish a couple of other things in business. Like I need to get over a couple more. I want to do it. Like there's some other accomplishments that need to happen as an executive and
Right.
a business owner that I want to accomplish before I get to writing a book. But when it comes to this music, this thing is like probably the closest thing that somebody will get to my truest narrative. So I'm probably gonna let it out sometime later on this year, but it's not the thing that's like
Nice.
the top of my priority list. Is like I'm
Right.
raising capital in what I want to be $1 billion immersive technology company right now, and serving people all around with my consulting firm. And really, I tell people I'm a technology rock star. Like I have traveled the world on technology. I have had the opportunity to do all different types of things in this space, and my persona as a rapper is this guy who took technology to a place that I feel like I'm in a selective group of people that come from our community that have done these types of things, and now I'm just more forthright about what their story and narrative is.
Man, that's super. I'm glad we talked about this.
Yeah, I
I'm
was
glad we
planning on getting into that bag, but you asked me about Camp Fam, so I had to, give
yeah,
it.
yeah,
Yeah.
I'm glad you did, man. Like we ran this series, and it was called "See Us, See Yourself," and it was around the non-technical things that make us who we are, right? Like,
Mm,
blacks in technology. Like, oh yeah, we've got people that are software engineers, CEOs, entrepreneurs. We got DevOps engineers, database engineers. But what else do you do? That's not the totality of who you are. That's just a part of it, right?
of
So
course.
what else do you do? So my whole thing was see us, see yourself was is promoting this to folks who are looking at technology and as maybe a career path, and they're unsure. They might be unsure, like, oh man, I don't know if I fit in. I don't know if I can do that. I don't know, because I like to do this. So I don't do I have to give this? No, you don't need to give that up. Like this is who you are, and you bring that your full self to the table, and share that with other people so you can help inspire other people. That's really what it's all about, man. So I'm glad you mentioned that, and I mention that all the time when I'm doing talks and everything like that. I mentioned that, hey, I used to rap, and folks are like, what, you used to rap? Yeah, yeah, I used to get down. And
Yeah.
I still can if I felt like rap, like I still drop on. But it's just something like to so folks can see themselves in
Yeah,
us, and
it's
not.
unalienating us, like because it's a
Yeah, I
thing
like that.
where I
I like
grew
that
up.
word.
I grew up extremely alien. Remember when I talked about the first part of my story and I said I wanted to get in tech when I was 13, 14? And do you know how many people I just had to stop talking about that passion? I had to stop talking to my community about it because I could feel it alienating me. I already knew that I was somewhat alienated because
Yeah,
of how my mind was already operating and how much I desired more knowledge than maybe everybody else that I don't want to say everybody, but like I was in the pursuit of knowledge in a way that I didn't see as many people actively pursuing it. So I could feel there was something different there, but I also knew that it kind of used to put me on this island. So I would have to do, not even in unintent, like I just used to do stuff that would make sure that
yeah,
my family, my friends, like know that like I'm still us, but I might just think a little bit like this.
yeah,
And the thing that's very intentional about my music is meant to like take that alienation factor that people look at people like Bill Gates and the reason why I said those guys' names in the beginning, not just because I'm trying to do a name drop. It's like I know how people used to look at Mark Zuckerberg and Bill Gates and Steve Jobs. And Steve Jobs, he didn't have it as bad as everybody else, but like a lot of these other
right,
guys were extremely alienated. Like you can see that people didn't humanize them in a certain kind of way. And Mark Zuckerberg and Jeff Bezos and Bill Gates, they've been spending years rehumanizing themselves to the rest of the world because they like everybody in the world is looking at these guys like they're alienated. They're in a whole different plateau. And Elon Musk, he's he makes sure that like I'm a real human, but I'm just going to keep doing crazy stuff. And he lets it be known in the most disruptive way, so it rubs a lot of people the wrong way. But you can't never confuse him for what Mark Zuckerberg used to be like 5 to maybe 7, 8 years ago, where people just used to look at him as
right,
like this thing that was like he's on his own little thing. Now it's like he in the mix of UFC. He's showing his family, his wife. He's showing like I'm a human just like everybody else. You know what I'm saying? And that's one of the things that I'm truly intentional about. Like I know that, especially coming from our community. Like I know how you think about how alienated they are. You just think how alienated, like, and I know you've had to deal with similar things being in these spaces where it's like, no, I'm still of the same, I'm the still
Yeah,
same little Dennis that grew up in St. Louis that had to figure out how to go cut grass everywhere else, that ultimately had to, I found things that I was passionate about that maybe was different from the people in my community, but like, remember, I'm still the same dude. Like, it ain't nothing that's
yeah,
too much different other than the fact that I got some more knowledge and experience in the space that everybody wasn't looking at as accessible. So, yeah, I think
yeah.
unalienating is like one of the biggest things that we have to do.
Yeah, I've unfortunately had to do that with family as well.
Hmm.
Let them look
Same.
at that. But I distinctly remember a situation back when I first went to college. There was a guy I seen there that, I used to play a lot of outdoor basketball.
Hmm.
And I seen this guy who used to play on the outdoor courts with us. And so he was like, "Oh, I didn't know you went to the school." I was like, "Yeah." He was like, "What are you taking?" I was like, "Computer network engineering." "Why are you taking that?" That was his response. And I was looking at him like, "What do you mean by that? Why am I taking that?" Like it was just so foreign for him to see me as another black dude to be taking engineering. I was just like, "Because it's the future. What are you talking about? Why am I taking that?" So yeah, I definitely understand that.
That's so
That
crazy that
that.
you say that because I felt the same way when I told people I wanted to study computer science the whole time I was in Atlanta. I mean, in St. Louis. The moment I got to Georgia Tech and I was telling people I'm studying electrical and computer engineering, they looked at me like it was almost like I was like, you get praised for being in that major in this environment. And it was just like a totally different world. It was like, oh my God, you're
Mm,
this? Oh, you're doing that? And it was more like,
man,
and I could just see the totally different. So that's when I understood
yeah,
perspective is everything. Like I just realized that
yeah.
it's all about how you see the world and how you look at things. Because from one perspective, you can see this as something that's impossible. From another perspective, you see it as like some of the most admirable things you can do. And it's more about, can you really complete the task? Can you really get it done? I'm like, I definitely can get it done. You know what I'm saying? But that was
Right.
more, yeah, it's dope to understand that now, just to hear it from somebody else too, because it's a
Yeah,
real thing. But I
yeah,
feel like now we're close to being able to close that gap up because it's time for it for
yeah.
real.
I agree. I agree. What's next for you?
I mean, the next thing is really the next 12 months I'm going to be locked in on raising capital, doing a pre-seed and seed round for On Another World experiences. The next thing also with my consulting firm, which I don't, my consulting firm is not something that takes all of my time. I have a team that kind of runs and manages a lot of the stuff there with me, but ultimately it's to scale that as well. So I want to get more active in the public speaking. I'm glad that I had the opportunity to do this podcast with you, but I know right now there's a level of visibility that I didn't have in the process and the journey of me developing my skills and experience that I know I need to flip the switch for the visibility that I need. So I'm actually focused on doing stuff to actually be more visible and being more accessible to my community in a more tangible way. So that's what the consulting company is the vehicle for. And really just locked in on taking my experience to the next trajectory and becoming the type of executive that can be mentioned in the name with the greats of people that have done amazing things in the tech industry, and really doing the work to get there. So that's the next thing for me, and just doing the work that comes along with that.
That's super dope, man. And before we get out of here, how can folks, if they want to reach out to you, websites,
For
social
sure.
media handles, yeah, give us all that.
All right, so on Instagram, that's probably the place I'm most frequent. I have my handle is Mr. BIZN Tech, TECH, but Mr. Biz and Tech is my Instagram handle. You can find me on LinkedIn, Dennis Campbell. I'm on LinkedIn is probably one of my most, you can kind of see the Rolodex of things that I've been through as a professional. And then I have my consulting company, dnyenterprises.com. If you're interested in kind of engaging with anything there, we help entrepreneurs and business owners of all types with all different types of projects. So we can kind of help almost anybody there. I'm also looking to expand in public speaking. So if you want to reach out to me, public speaking courses,
For
all of that
sure.
stuff there. And then On Another World, literally our website is onanother.world. So basically everything On Another World will be there. We also have a members platform for On Another World right now. So you can literally go in there, sign up for early access and kind of stay in the loop and everything On Another World related because we will be doing a lot of stuff over the next few months as we get ready to roll up for our space. Our spot will be opening up sometime this summer. So we're just in the process of doing the build up for all of that right now.
Excellent, excellent. And I'll put all that, all those links in the show notes as well. so folks can just go to the episode and click on those links. Man, Dennis, this has been super dope, man. Like from an inspirational standpoint, it's been a pleasure, and it's been a pleasure just to hear your journey, to see where you're going, to see that hear about the things that you've done. I have no doubt. I mean, you're already going there. I have no doubt you're going to be at the top, man. And once folks check out this episode, like I said, folks are going to reach out because you have a lot to offer, not just in the term, in tech, but just from a business standpoint as well, man. So I really, really enjoyed this episode, and I wish you nothing but the best. I'll definitely be reaching out. We got BitCon coming up in October.
I'll be there.
So yeah. So we're gonna need speakers and all that stuff as well. So definitely want to put you on a list for that. So we'll be reaching out to you.
For sure. I appreciate the time, Greg. This interview, it was mutual, man.